Chapter 1909 Blasphemy 50 Reapers of Love exploding at the same time would be an unimaginable force that would surely cause major problems. Zhang Yi looked at Liu Karen. Is there a way to control their missile launch through the network? Liu Karen helplessly shrugged her shoulders and said, it's all controlled by the local area network. It's to prevent intrusion from the outside. Zhang Yi frowned. This is a difficult problem, isn't it? Liu Karen laughed when she saw Zhang Yi frown. Brother, there's an easy way to deal with this problem. A bright light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Oh? What's the solution? Liu Karen said, why not just invade their missile launch base? The missile launch bases of the KG Kingdom are all important military sites, located in very secret places and heavily guarded. If the top echelons of the KG Kingdom gave the order, they would release all the Reapers of Love at once. Even if they were intercepted in midair, the radiation from 50 Reapers of Love would have a very significant impact on the atmosphere. However, no matter how powerful a weapon is, or how sophisticated a technological product is, it is operated by people. Liu Karen said, the entire network of the KG Kingdom is under my control. At that time, I just need to cut off their network communications and phones so that no news can be transmitted from Prison City. Then I will go and break into their missile launch bases one by one. With the Snow Owls and the Mobile Task Force, this will not be difficult. Liu Karen also had thousands of modified mechanical life forms under her command, each with the strength of a Delta-level mutant warrior with over 9,000 points. With Liu Karen's assurance, Zhang Yi also let his guard down. So in the end, there is only one obstacle in our way. Zhang Yi looked at the three-dimensional projection of the image of Marshal Kensane in front of him. That's him. Whether or not they can defeat Marshal Kensane is the key to this battle. Zhang Yi is not sure of Kensane's specific combat power, but from the information he obtained from the Undertaker, he can understand the characteristics of the power of faith. First, the stronger the faith, the more powerful the power of faith. Second, the more followers there are, the more powerful the power of faith. Third, the power of faith is vested in specific things or people, such as Sangha Temple in the southwest region, and this power has a regional nature. Therefore, when Kensane is in Prison City, his abilities can reach their maximum state. Analyze these conditions comprehensively. Within Prison City, Marshal Kensane's combat power will not exceed 40,000 points. This is a very simple mathematical problem, which can be compared through Tantra. There are approximately 2 million Tantra believers in the southwest region, only 1/10 of the population of the KG Kingdom. However, the Tantric faith is bound to be more pure and pious than that of the people of the KG Kingdom. The Undertaker is a combination of the two brothers Yugo and Luozhua. These two mutants of level Black Chariot, after combining forces and receiving the blessing of the power of faith, can reach a combat power of 35,000 points. Marshal Kensane initially attempted to launch a counterattack against the Roman Empire, but he was defeated by Jupiter, the God King at that time. Jupiter's supernatural ability index was at the level of the Black Chariot. In other words, Kensane's own strength was at most the level of the Black Chariot. The conclusion to be drawn from this is that even with the power of faith, Kensane's supernatural ability index is only at the level of a Black Bishop, and 30,000 to 40,000 points is the most reasonable range. In an extraordinary state, it will not exceed the boundary by much. After determining the opponent's strength range, Zhang Yi felt more confident. After Chernobyl's baptism by the Yi Han tribe, the strength of both he and Yang Xinxin had been greatly enhanced. Zhang Yi's supernatural ability index was 35,000 points, coupled with the divine refinement, whose ability index had reached 20,000 points, and the demon god armor created from the remains of Ishigard. This allowed him to contend with any opponent below 40,000 points. Even if the opponent's strength does not exceed 45,000 points, he can escape relatively easily. In other words, he is already invincible. However, how to defeat Kensane is still a difficult problem. The characteristic of the power of faith is to enhance the strength of the strongest mutant in all aspects, and it can even give the opponent an almost immortal physique. Unless Zhang Yi kills everyone in the KG Kingdom, This source of power will never be eliminated, so defeating Kensane will be difficult. Zhang Yi had his own ideas. He said to young Xin, you stay by my side. People with the power of faith are hard to kill, but as long as you can control them and make them destroy themselves, that'll be fine. Yang Xin nodded. She was now able to fight alongside Zhang Yi. But that's not enough. I can't completely relax. We need to add another layer of insurance. Uncle Yu crossed his arms and stood next to Zhang Yi like a black iron tower. Upon hearing this, he rubbed his chin and said, "If only it were like when we dealt with the Undertaker in the southwest region." The Undertaker's power came from the power of the Tantric faith. A devout monk could become a Buddha and be worshipped by believers. However, his heart of a Buddha was broken by Zhang Yi with a man and woman, which greatly reduced his power. Attacking the heart is the best? Fatty Sue said with a serious face. However, judging from the level of that guy's perversion, it will be very difficult to get him to break his defenses. It's not completely impossible. Zhang Yi's face revealed a mysterious smile. All false forms of reverence for the gods will disappear when the lie is exposed and turn into infinite hatred. If the power of faith is gathered together, it can be turned into a powerful force and make a person strong. Then the hatred and resentment of countless ordinary people, when gathered together, can also be transformed into the most terrifying curse in the world. He waved his hand towards Lu Karen and Deng Xintong, and the two of them came to his side. Deng, now is the time for your Deng family's intelligence agency to come into play. Karen, I'll leave the technical aspects of it all to you. He spoke of his plan, and after listening, everyone let out a gasp. This is a bit too ruthless, isn't it? This is like digging up someone's ancestors' graves. If it is successfully implemented, it will definitely shake the foundations of Kensane. And for such a huge project, I'm afraid only Karen can do it. Lu Karen confidently patted her chest. Don't worry, brother. I'll take care of it. Zhang Yi looked at Lu Karen with relief. Karen, you have the heaviest burden in this operation. You need to solve the 3 major missile launch bases as soon as possible and then immediately move on to the second task. Moreover, this operation requires you to fly over all the cities with large populations in the KG Kingdom in the shortest amount of time possible. Lu Karen's mouth curled up into a confident smile, and her eyes sparkled as she said, as long as the Reaper of Love is dealt with, ordinary ground-to-air missiles, even if they rain down like meteors, won't be able to harm my snow all. Brother, just leave this to me, and I'll complete the mission 100% successfully. Zhang Yi nodded with relief. Lu Karen's abilities really did not require him to worry. Remember, Zhang Yi's gaze swept over everyone at the scene. This time, we need to split up. I have no doubt in your abilities, but I must remind you, on the battlefield, remember not to show mercy, because they will most likely use civilians as shields for themselves or lure them to block you. But whoever blocks your path must be eliminated. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, his eyes cold and unyielding. This is a cruel war. In previous operations, Zhang Yi had led them into battle, so they had not faced any difficult choices. Therefore, Zhang Yi had to remind them that they must not be merciful. He said, "Do you remember what was the first difficult problem we encountered after the Gate of Light in Chernobyl?" Lu Karen answered quickly, "I remember. It was the trolley problem." Zhang Yi said, "The liberal answer is now the most recognized in the world. Everyone believes that the interests of the majority should not be sacrificed for the minority. However, in reality, very few people actually do that, especially when the problem is extreme. If it is not a matter of sacrificing one person to save 5, but saving 50,000 or even 5 million people." Zhang Yi said, "When we look at the problem from the perspective of God, we cannot consider the individual. We can only think in terms of the big picture. And our mission is the most important part of the big picture. And after the mission is completed, we can save the 20 million people of the entire KG Kingdom. The world is a cruel place. The so-called pricelessness of human life is just a deceptive slogan, like Amitabha. So I hope that whoever gets in the way of our mission, even for just a second, will be eliminated without hesitation. Otherwise, everything will lead to the worst possible outcome. If we can't get rid of Kensane, 50 Reapers of Love will be launched into the sky, and we from the Huashu Kingdom will get into big trouble as a result. We absolutely must not let that happen. Everyone's expression became very serious. Just imagining the consequences made them shudder. Fatty Sue said, "Don't worry, Big Brother Lao. We've been with you for so long. We've seen it all. How could we make such a mistake?" Zhang Yi shook his head. "No, this time is different. In the past, no matter how powerful or despicable the opponent was, we could always defeat them with our strength and strategy. But this time, we are dealing with a despicable politician." He stared at Fatty Sue and asked with a smile if when you were about to kill Kensian, he suddenly had a group of little girls point guns at your head, what would you do? In that split second of confusion, you'll be killed. At a time like this, would you choose to die yourself or kill them? Fatty Sue opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but his mouth opened and closed, and in the end, he was speechless. Cold sweat ran down the top of his head, and he suddenly realized that if he really encountered such a tactic, he would definitely be frozen in place and at a loss. A momentary mistake between masters can determine life and death. Hesitation would greatly increase the probability of his death. Not just Fatty Sue, but everyone present began to think. In the past, the one responsible for being the villain had always been Zhang Yi. He made the decisions, and the others obeyed, and they felt very little guilt. But now, it was their turn to make a choice, and it was indeed a dilemma. Zhang Yi didn't need them to hesitate, because he had already given his answer. Just do what you can without feeling guilty. In heaven and on earth, I alone am supreme. Only by first learning to protect myself can I go on to protect others. As long as someone wants to endanger the lives of me and my companions, no matter who it is, I will wipe them out. Zhang Yi's words slowly dispelled the confusion in the eyes of many people. They were used to obeying Zhang Yi's orders, and he had given these people a home for their souls. In this way, no matter what kind of enemy they encounter, they will not hesitate to draw their swords. As long as they have a clear conscience, who can say clearly the twists and turns of right and wrong in the world, and be a saint. I hope you can consider these issues carefully. There are many links in this operation. You must complete your tasks without making mistakes. Do you understand? Zhang Yi raised his voice, as if shouting to wake the crowd from their contemplation. Understood. The crowd shouted in unison. Zhang Yi nodded, figuring that it was about time to go back. So the group got into the car and headed back to Prison City. He didn't go back to say hello to Chao Wang Chai, to avoid the other party from having to leave him at home to take a big dump. The car drove back, and Park Chong-fan's origin was completely absorbed by Zhang Yi, leaving nothing but an empty shell. Yang Xin controlled his corpse as the black thread invaded his body, allowing his vocal cords to produce normal sounds. In Prison City, Choi Jae received a report communication from Park Chong-fan. Minister Choi, there is nothing wrong with the cook. You call me back from the front just for this person? Choi Jae, in addition to serving as the captain of Marshal Sain's personal guard, also served as the Minister of Supervision of the KG Kingdom. Upon hearing Park Chong-fan's words, Choi Jae's brows furrowed deeply. You didn't find anything wrong? Of course. Do you think he could possibly escape my watch? He's just an ordinary cook. Greedy, lustful, and has a high sensitivity to wealth and women. His combat skills are average, not even comparable to a well-trained ordinary soldier. Minister Choi, you're being a bit too sensitive. Choi Jae pinched his eyebrows as he heard the mockery in Park Chong-fan's tone. I understand. Thank you for your help, Captain Park. After ending the communication, Choi Jae let out a sigh of relief. Although his intuition had failed him, the man was indeed clean. He began to suspect that it was because he had been in the position of Inspector General of the KG Kingdom for so long that his heart had become increasingly sensitive. After all, the chef who had defected before was also from the Wasa Kingdom, just like Wu Yinju. Until now, they had not discovered where that person was. Now, Wu Yinju has passed all the tests, whether it be the physical examination, the background investigation, or even Park Chong-fan personally, and no problems have been found. Choi Jae believes that he can rest assured. Unless the other party is the world's #1 mutant who is good at concealing information about themselves, it is impossible to pass so many investigations. Zhang Yi stored Park Chang-fan's corpse in dimensional space and, based on searching his memories, did not find any recent important missions. So there is no need to worry about him being called to do something. But in the long run, paper can't hold back fire forever, and action must be taken as soon as possible. He waited for the phone at home to ring again. Zhang Yi returned to Prison City with Yagu. It was already late, but instead of taking Zhang Yi back to his residence, Yagu took him to the most luxurious club in the inner city of Prison City. As a member of the royal family, Zhang Yi successfully obtained an entrance ticket and successfully played the part of a lecherous man. He even took the initiative to find the person in charge of the venue and selected a Miss Blue Flower who performed well on stage. Following the same method as before, he implanted false memories in her and completely solidified his persona. Together with Yaga's personal testimony, Choi Jae completely let down his guard against Zhang Yi. It wasn't until noon the next day that Zhang Yi returned to his residence. Deng Xintong began mobilizing the Deng family's intelligence network to gather the information Zhang Yi had requested and to make the items needed for the operation. The production volume was very large, and he was fully committed to it. Commander Kensane had many imperial chefs at his side, and he didn't need to eat Eastern Guangdong cuisine every day. However, newcomers to the kitchen always had a better chance of being hired by relatives. One night 2 days later, just after 10 o'clock, the phone in Zhang Yi's room rang. He suddenly sat up from the sofa, and everyone else in the room fixed their eyes on the landline phone, which had been popular half a century ago. The phone rang, ring, ring. The ringing was a little noisy at midnight, especially in the silent room. Zhang Yi did not answer the phone because he was waiting. Very few households in Prison City were entitled to a telephone at home, and there were rarely any personal calls, as they were always made on orders from a higher authority. And, at night, there was usually only one department that would call, the inspection department, under the command of Director Choi Jae. If the phone rang only 5 times and then stopped, it meant that it was someone's boring interruption. But the 6th ring was proof that it was an urgent summons from the inspection department. After the 5th ring, Zhang Yi narrowed her eyes. Ring, ring. It wasn't until the 6th ring that Zhang Yi picked up the phone. Hello? Who is this? A familiar voice came from the other end of the line. It was Choi Jae himself. Chef Wu, come downstairs immediately. Someone will come to pick you up. For tonight's general's dinner, you've been specifically requested to be the chef. Zhang Yi looked up and met the eyes of everyone in the room. Everyone was wearing combat uniforms and exoskeleton armor, and as soon as the bell rang, they began to prepare. They knew that this moment had finally arrived. I'll be right down. Please wait for my people. Zhang Yi's face showed no expression, but his tone was panicked. He hung up the phone and issued orders for the battle. Let's get started. Tonight, one battle will determine the outcome. Muyan opened her shadow, which was like a huge cloth bag, and Yang Xinxin and the others stepped inside. The shadows merged into Zhang Yi's shadow, except for Lu Karen and Deng Xintong, who did not come in. They needed to take care of other things. Zhang Yi glanced at the woman in the room, who was still in a daze, reached out and pushed open the doors, and walked downstairs. Downstairs, the car sent by the Ministry of Supervision was already waiting, and among the people who came was Yagu. Yang Xinxin's abilities had now reached a higher level, and the time he could control an ordinary person had been greatly extended. This was not a matter of depriving the other person of consciousness, but rather of changing their perception, so Yagu would not be found to be in any way unusual. He simply sincerely believed that he was Yang Xinxin's slave. Zhang Yi got into the car, and the car immediately sped off into the darkness towards the commander's residence. After they had left, Lu Karen, dressed in a white, form-fitting combat suit, also summoned the snow owl. The huge mecha appeared from nowhere. It had perfect stealth technology. Not only was it not displayed on radar charts, it was also optically invisible, and the naked eye could not see its existence. Lu Karen boarded the cockpit of the snow owl, while Deng Xintong, dressed in combat fatigues, grabbed the chain extending from the snow owl. The night wind howled, and the snow owl flew, like a ghost, towards the distance, its target being the nearest missile launch base to Prison City. Zhang Yi sat in the back seat of the car, his heart beating a little faster. Whenever there was about to be a big battle, he would feel a little nervous. But this nervousness was also accompanied by a sense of excitement. Over time, he could no longer say whether he hated fighting or liked the thrill of teetering on the edge of life and death, doing his best to overcome powerful enemies. But one thing was certain, he was 100% ready for battle. He buried his emotions deep in the darkness, keeping them from being exposed, like the best hunter, just waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. Zhang Yi once again arrived at that magnificent, gorgeous island. As usual, he went to the kitchen to prepare dinner, and today he had prepared a special dish. From Hyun Heise's mouth, he found out about Ken Sane's tastes and knew what dishes he liked. Tonight, he is tampered with the food. Don't get me wrong, drugging it is definitely out of the question, because the whole process is supervised at all times, and as a rule the chef must taste the food first. What Zhang Yi has done is simply increase the carbohydrate content of tonight's meal and add a few dishes that will make the general drink a couple of glasses more. A high carbohydrate intake will make people drowsy, eating too much will make movement difficult, and it goes without saying that drinking too much alcohol will make you drunk. The commander never gets drunk, and when he seems drunk, he is just pretending. He doesn't trust anyone. But he doesn't think that a delicious, non-toxic meal could have any effect on his body. Transcribed by Turbo CRIB AI. Go unlimited to remove this message.